And now for something completely different.
Forget everything you've been told by others before. Get ready for the real deal, the full story. Real talk about money, markets, life. Now, it's The Real Investment Show with Lance Roberts. Presented by RIA Advisors.
And good morning, welcome to the show. So it's, of course, Wednesday, hump day, getting ready to get halfway through this week already. Kind of moving fast this week. We'll see how it goes. Thanksgiving fast approaching, then it's Christmas, then New Year's, and then Valentine's Day. So just get ready to start spending money because it's just nonstop for the next few months. So yesterday, not much is going on right now. We're still waiting for this government shutdown to end. There is going to be a deluge of economic reports coming out very soon. But looking at some of the off-the-run data, there certainly seems to be a larger economic slowdown at work over the course of October and moving into November. Using some of this other data, we could see a negative jobs print in the October employment report. We'll see. But it certainly suggests, between looking at layoffs and what's happening with some of the other employment data, certainly looks like there was a slowdown in job creation over the last month. Also, we're seeing a pretty big drop in rental prices, which will feed through to home prices as well. 40% of CPI, a little bit more than 40% of the inflation calculation is tied to rental income, so the homeowner's equivalent rent. And so that's a combination of both rental income as well as estimated, what homeowners expect that they could rent their house for. That also suggests that that's going to be negative. So that could also lead to a lower inflation print when we see some of this data coming out. Again, we don't know yet. Again, once the government gets a hold of it, they start jiggering with the data, you get different numbers. But based on some of the off-the-run data, it certainly looks like there's a continued slowdown within the economy. Nothing major, nothing drastic, but does suggest we're going to see a lower than expected inflation print and a weaker than expected employment report. That will certainly put the Federal Reserve in the right position to cut rates in December. That should bode well for the markets because markets are expecting a rate cut in December. So again, kind of all these things are kind of just still working in that direction. Now, the big hope is, of course, is that next year we're going to have a big economic resurgence and that all this is going to come roaring back to life because of AI data center build-outs and the infrastructure required around that. There's a lot of hope for that next year, that $5 to $7 trillion worth of spending that's sitting out there will start to feed into the economy. We'll see. Lots of expectations. Valuations certainly have already well priced that in. So we'll see how markets react as we get to next year. But for now, everything still seems to be okay. A little bit of weakness yesterday. We've talked about recently about rotations within the markets and to be cautious with having a one-sided bet. I know there's a lot of stocks out there that are just not doing great this year. They haven't done as well as the AI stocks or whatever. But sometimes it's worth owning good fundamental quality companies in your portfolio because yesterday was a really good example of this. Is that in our weekend newsletter, if you go to the website realinvestmentadvice.com, go to our Bull Bear Report, which is our weekend newsletter. I post towards the bottom of that newsletter, I post the most oversold sector and then the positions within that most oversold sector because that's generally where you're going to see money rotate to. Well, for weeks, that's been staples, defensive, those type of stocks. And over the last really kind of few days, we've started to see that rotation into those areas. So again, just something to pay attention to because again, markets don't always just go in one direction based on one group like technology stocks. That certainly seems to be the case so far, but there's been some weakness there lately, some profit taking in those areas. And of course, everybody's like, oh, it's the end of AI trade. Be careful with that. It's probably not. But again, those were very overbought. So we're getting a bit of a pullback that is now rotating into some of these other sectors. And that's okay. That's good. So, having some of those positions or portfolios certainly helps stabilize the volatility in the markets. It also helps stabilize the volatility in your portfolio. But again, we touched on this a little bit yesterday. Here's what you need to know before the bell this morning. So again, we came right off that 50-day moving average. The buy the dipper stepped in. Yesterday, the markets opened up a little bit weak, came in, bought the market all afternoon, finished up kind of moving higher yesterday afternoon. So again, we're coming right off that buy the dip. We're about to trigger a MACD momentum buy signal. Relative strength is not overbought yet, but is starting to recover. So that's all very bullish for the markets here near term. But again, this is the market cap weighted index. And as we talked a little bit about yesterday, the equal weighted index is looking, kind of very much similar, but seeing that same type of action. Again, we're starting to see that rotation into other areas of the market. That's why the relative strength, the equal weighted index has now broken back above the 50 and the 20-day moving average and is set to try to start pushing up towards recent highs. Again, triggering a buy signal there, relative strength improving. So the point is, again, just maintain some diversification within your overall portfolio, because that's going to help shelter you when we get into these areas where all of a sudden, the big mega cap stocks, they're not working as well. Other areas of the market is. So, if you're highly concentrated into very specific stocks, you're going to have a lot more volatility in your portfolio. If you can diversify out a bit, you'll perform a bit better. But continue to watch this, because again, we've been talking about this potential rotation within the overall markets. And, one area in particular that, we're paying attention to has been energy as of late. Starting to see a bit of a pickup here in the energy sector, even though oil prices haven't done a whole lot here. Again, there's going to be a huge power demand issue over the course of the next few years because of AI and data center generation, particularly in the power provisions areas of that. So think about natural gas turbines, those type of things. It takes 2 to 3 years to build out a natural gas turbine. For an AI data center, it's 10 years for a nuclear power plant. So again, we're probably going to see some near-term demand for natural gas generation, power generation near term. So there's going to be some opportunities in that sector. But we're starting to see a bit of opportunity in the XLE. So again, just XLE, which owns oil and natural gas refiners. We're starting to see some movement there over the last few days. Also, too, just, staples is one of those areas that has been under just an immense amount of pressure. And this is really, kind of very tied to what's going on with the consumer. The consumer is weak. But we're starting to see a little bit of a pickup here in the staples. So we're starting to see a little bit of this rotation into some of these more defensive areas. Again, this is very early, about to trigger a buy signal from a very, very oversold level. There's some potential here for a decent run in staples. So just something to maybe kind of think about in your portfolio as well. So anyway, there's what you need to know before the bell this morning. We'll come back, pick up with Danny Ratliff. Got some stuff to get into. How to live. Once you get we talked a lot about getting to retirement. Had a great email question yesterday talking about, well, I'm here, what do I do now? And so we'll talk about that. Don't go away.
Got questions for Lance later? Ask now at realinvestmentadvice.com.
And now, another page from the Real Investment Advisors Investing Manifesto. Manage risk and volatility rather than trying to manage gains. You don't have to be right all the time. Long-term investing success is a 70% gain. Let us help you reach your financial goals with RIA Advisors. Neither bull nor bear. RIA Advisors, 281-501-1791 or online at realinvestmentadvice.com.
You're listening to The Real Investment Show.
All right, good morning. Welcome to the show. Danny, good morning. How are you?
Hey, morning. Great.
Good. So before we get into our conversation this morning, just another topic that came up is we touched on yesterday a little bit about the 50-year mortgages, which are just absolutely crazy. But another one is this idea of Trump had floated out this idea the other day about a $2,000 check, right? So it's a dividend check from the tariffs. And there's kind of an interesting, so there's two things about that. So first of all, the tariffs are up for review at the Supreme Court. Did Trump, the question is simply this: did Trump have the executive authority to issue a tax on foreign countries when taxes are by definition a function of Congress? So that's really the question before Supreme Court is can the president usurp Congress's authority to to implement a tax using executive privilege. So we'll see how that turns out. Right now, the betting odds on the outcome of this are pretty low, that most likely the Supreme Court will rule against the Trump administration and say, no, you need to go through Congress, which means that he'll have a period of time, most likely, to go back through Congress, get tariffs implemented into law as a tax, and then go from there. So we'll see what happens. But here's the interesting thing. So President Trump announced this idea is like, hey, we're going to send a $2,000 check to households, unless you're wealthy. And that'll be a tariff dividend. So it's kind of a smart move if he did this. It's good and bad, because it would be very, very hard for the Supreme Court to come back and try to claw back $2,000 from every household in America to refund tariffs. Right now, that money's just sitting in the Treasury. And so basically the Supreme Court could say, hey, you need to refund all these tariffs and send them back to the countries you collected them from, because they were collected, not illegally, but they were just not collected properly, is a better word. And so you have to send the money back. And so that would require debt issuance. We'd have to refund that money. So it'd be a very different thing, though, if that money was already sent to households. So we'll see. But there's a lot of excitement about this. It's like, oh, great, this is kind of going back to what we saw in kind of 2021 and 2020, where we were sending checks to households. Well, the results of that were not great, if you remember. You create a lot of inflation. Now, there is a difference. The economy's fully open now versus then. You had a shut down economy and no supply, and so prices went through the roof because everybody was trying to buy something with a $2,000 check and create inflation. A little bit different this time. You probably won't get the inflation push if that actually happened, but you would certainly make people very happy. But already, though, Scott Besson has pretty much shot this idea down. He said, oh, no, the $2,000 dividend is going to come in the form of either the tax cuts, the no tax on tips, the things that we've already are passing through Congress. That's how you're getting your $2,000. So Scott Besson's pretty much already kind of laid the case out that no, you're not going to get a $2,000 check, most likely. Now, again, anything is possible. The good news is, and I should say that's the good news. The good news is anything is possible. You might get a check. The reality is no, you probably won't. And again, the outcome of that on inflationary pressures, et cetera, again, because this is just the way the economy works, if the marketplace, if the economy knows that you're about to get, I know Danny's about to get a $2,000 check, right? And Danny has 3 kids and a very expensive wife to maintain. And
if she's listening, you're in trouble. Oh, man.
And so immediately, Danny's going to go out and spend his $2,000. Well, he's going to go out and spend it on, new shoes for the kids, whatever, right? And immediately, the shoemakers are going to go, I know Danny's got $2,000. Price of my shoes are going up, right? So it will cause, when you send out $2,000 checks to households, it will cause some rate of inflation. That'll be very short-lived because once the money's spent, it's over, right? And so prices will come back down as demand slows. These things are never a good idea. They're great for getting votes or getting approval ratings up, those type of things. But economically, sending out and there's been plenty of studies now about universal basic incomes, complete failures. They do not work because it does not provide a better standard of living. The idea of universal basic income is I give Danny a basic income so he can go do other stuff that he likes. Well, the problem is the entire economy shifts to that universal.
Raises the poverty level.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it increases the poverty level and, again, creates no incentive to work because I'm getting free money. So these things are never a good idea. Economically, historically, they never work out well. I suspect that, and this is why Scott Besson came out and made the comments he did, is like, you're already getting your $2,000 refund through no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security. And we need to talk about that, Danny. No tax on Social Security. That's how you're getting your money back. That is a better way to couch this than sending out $2,000 checks to households. Anyway.
Well, he's floated these ideas out historically. I mean, every couple months. I mean, he had a Doge dividend. You had all of these different ideas that he floats out. They sound great on paper, but like you mentioned, it raises the poverty level. Prices go up. So you do see that small inflationary push, but this is a little different than what we saw during the pandemic because it's not something that is continual, right? It's just that one time you're done. And the economy's not shut down, right? You don't have the supply and demand impact. So much, much different. What else do we have right now to see what interest rates may or may not do? I think what is it, 60% odds they hike rates, the Fed's fighting.
Yeah.
And today we've got a 10-year bond auction.
Yep. So yeah. But again, my whole point is that the question is just, could we address this on our show? I'm happy to do it. And Danny's right. We've heard a lot of things from this administration over time. Most of this stuff will never come true. So I would not be betting the future here on a $2,000 check. So yeah, don't spend it yet, right? This is one of those things that you don't spend it till it's actually in your account. So just be careful. Let's talk about spending, Danny. I got a great email from a gentleman and talking about that most retirement advice focuses on saving and not running out of money, but few talk about how to spend confidently once you've achieved financial independence. Now, and he went through his personal situation in the email, and I'm not going to go through his personal finances here on the air, but he's done very well for himself. He's saved. He's done all the right things, right? In that he's saved, he's invested, he's worked hard all these years. He's got a small pension, I believe. He's got Social Security to look forward to. And, so the question really comes down to is okay, well, I've done all these right things. When can I start, start thinking about kind of retirement spending, right? How do I balance that? Because it is something we don't talk a lot about. We don't talk about.
Well, because the bulk of the country is just trying to figure out how to retire, right?
Exactly. We talk a lot about how to get to retirement. We don't talk a lot about what to do when you're in retirement. And again, this is a really, and I will tell you, Danny, is that, because I'm 973 years old now, and at this
you were
age,
here for the Titanic.
My wife was the one pushing me off the door. There's not enough room up here for you to get on. You stay in the water.
You didn't do your diet this week. You're taking this boat down.
Exactly. So, but yeah, it is interesting because you have to have a mental mindset shift from I've got to kind of be frugal. I've got to save money, and you've been doing this for 20 or 30 years. Saving, budgeting, investing, doing all these right things to get to where you want to be for retirement. And it's not easy. This is, we talk about this a lot with, a lot of the housing conundrum. Young people are going, well, I can't afford a house. Well, getting a house is a long process. You've got to save for years to be able to afford your first house. And you're just going to have to. But you've got to build that habit of saving to get there. But once you get into retirement, it's hard to flip that switch off because you've been doing it for 30 years.
Yeah. Well, this is a challenge for everybody. I mean, I honestly don't know many people, and we visit with a whole lot of different folks in many different walks of life and phases. And switching that off from being an accumulator to a distributor is an extreme challenge. And, probably, we're talking a lot on different scenarios. And, we could get in a little bit more details so I could give a little bit more specific, kind of, not going to say advice, but just thoughts around, the scenarios that are out there. But for many people, they're out there and they're saying, oh man, I need to pull back. In fact, I had a conversation with somebody yesterday, said, I'm spending too much. I'm spending more than what we'd anticipated. And, we begin to look at that within the financial plan. We'll look at it over on a year-on-year basis, say, okay, well, last year we had an odd year, right? Well, this year appears to be odd too. Did everything break again?
Yeah.
Right? Did your AC go out? Did you need a new car? Did you need a roof on the house? Or are we just spending too much money? And so we can develop trends over time, say, okay, well, now we've got a potential issue. But for many, and the gentleman that wrote in, look, retired, single, no kids, no pure legacy intent. How do I spend and enjoy the money? And I still think for many, because I can assure you, it's very likely he did a whole lot of hard work to get there. And by doing so, he was probably living well beneath his means. He was making very good decisions all along the way. And now you're saying, okay, well, I'm here. I can live a little more free or a little more loose because all of this has paid off. And that's a challenge even when you've done extremely well, because you remember when you didn't have those funds and you don't want to get back there again. And now your human capital is diminishing as we age. We're probably not going back to work making the same amount of money. We're probably not, in a physical state or maybe even mental to be able to keep up at some point, right? There's many of you out there, and so don't feel like I'm talking to you if you're retired, because there's plenty of you that are sharp, very, very sharp. But that is a challenge. So how do you end up doing that? I hear many times like, I want to spend my last dollar with one foot in the grave, or I'm ready to write that check that bounces.
I'm gonna be in debt when I die. Sorry, kids.
So the funny thing is, you're going to die in here.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I know you. What are you going to spend your money on?
I'm going to figure out. See, but this.
Yeah, so you're going to have to figure that out, right? But that's what many people are doing.
This is the email.
No, that's exactly why I've asked that question.
Yeah.
So now you've spent so much time building this wealth, and now you're like, I don't have any hobbies. What do I do?
Right.
So we talk a lot, like within financial planning, about the qualitative aspect of life and retirement. And number one, it gives us a sense of purpose. It's going to give us an idea on where you're going to spend your time, which typically your money will follow. But that's a conundrum for many people. Like, what do I do now?
Because I figured out two things now, right? My wife and I, it's like my wife came home yesterday from work. And they had a Wiffleball contest at their office yesterday. They had a team building thing. Now, you're laughing, right? There is we actually held an event in our office at out in Katy, Texas. It's kind of on the outskirts of Houston at a baseball batting cages. Remember that?
Yeah.
Right next door to that is a Wiffleball field.
Well, in the facility.
It's actually in the facility.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's where they went. So I had no idea. Wiffleball was a thing. But anyway, so they had a team building event yesterday. And so the whole office goes out there and they break up into 3 teams. They're playing wiffle ball and having a tournament. Well, my wife can't play right now, so she's keeping score. And she came home yesterday and she's like, it's like, and she's a powerhouse, right? If you know my wife, she's a little bit intimidating. She's super sweet, but she scares me. Okay. Let me just tell you, she scares me a little bit.
And that's why we have to keep her and Michelle away from each other.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's true. They're both powerhouses, and it's like fire and water.
You have spontaneous combustion.
Fire and oil. I mean, yeah. But anyway, she's a little bit intimidating because she's their top salesman, and she does a very good job. She's very focused on what she's doing and stuff. So she's at this tournament yesterday, and she says, it was a little bit sad because like there's all the girls in the office. They're at a table, over here talking, and they didn't invite me over or anything. And I'm like, well, honey, did you go over and say anything to them? They said they're probably a little bit intimidated by you because of your level in the business. And she's like, well, no. And I said, well, the second thing, honey, you don't like people anyway. And she's like, well, there is that.
There is that problem.
But it would be nice to have friends. And I'm like, you don't like friends. And it's true, though, as we get older, my wife and I had this conversation yesterday. It's like, we don't really like people anymore. Yeah. So we just kind of want to be by ourselves and do our thing together and not have a whole bunch of friends to deal with. But it's kind of interesting, though, because once you start getting to this older age, I mean, your world does start to shrink a bit, and you start getting a little bit more contained in the things you do, where you go, what you're doing. And when you're young, like my kids, they have these big friend groups, and they're constantly doing stuff with 20 or 30 of their buddies. And I'm like, and now even as they're getting older, that friend group's starting to shrink already, right?
Yeah, but what you're really saying is that you being the Grinch finally wore off on her.
Yeah, too.
Yeah.
Sure, absolutely. But it does pose a challenge in retirement, though. Again, what are you going to do with your time?
Well, it is.
Right?
And
What are your hobbies, or do you have a hobby? Right, you got to find a hobby if you don't have one.
Well, and then for men specifically, many men have a very big challenge. Right, we're used to meeting deadlines, and I'm not excluding women here by any stretch, but for whatever women are more social, right? Men are not. So most of the interaction that we get is probably in the office. Yeah. Outside of that, you're not getting nearly as much interaction, and we're not nearly as social. So men do struggle with this. So having that sense of purpose, are you going to, give time to charity? If you don't have kids or grandkids, where does that time go, right? Because many people just pour into family. And so really getting back to the question is, how do I enjoy the funds? Well, what do you enjoy to do? I think is number one. And then making sure you have those guardrails within your plan that says, hey, I can spend freely enough up to here. This gentleman, single, in his 60s, no debt, retired, ready to go, right? Has saved, done very well. But flipping that switch is extremely challenging. And so I think when you think about it, break down the plan, look at it, say, what can I do? Are there going to be years I'm going to spend quite a bit more? I mean, we talk about, distribution planning and retirement. This could be a great time for that. Understanding where those assets are, how you can use them, how you can utilize them over your lifespan. But then, we didn't even get in and we don't know, what does longevity look like? What does your health look like? That's a big piece of the puzzle. And, if we knew our expiration date, all of this planning would be so much easier, right? If we knew our expiration date and what was going to happen in between here and there. I mean, that would be, I probably wouldn't have a job.
Yeah, true.
And if we had a tax code like they've claimed they're going to do forever, that was going to be on a postcard.
That's never going to happen either.
Yeah.
But again, this is, so, back to our email, specifically, I think this is, and this is, and really where I am in life right now, where my wife is right now, because of what's going on just with her in particular, we're having to really rethink, longevity has now become a real question in our family. So we're having to rethink about what, our future is going to look like. And we're trying to refine that. And this is, kind of the point is that we don't know how long we're going to live. And at some point when you get into retirement, you do have to start thinking about things to do. And, what kind of lifestyle do I want to have? I've spent all these years. I didn't travel. I didn't do these things early in life because I was trying to get to this point. And so now you have to start saying, look, now it's time to start enjoying life a bit, right? So, if fishing's your hobby, go buy a boat, right? If you like,
just go hire a guide; it'll be cheaper.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean,
you know what they say about boats, right?
Oh no, yeah. But it's the best day of your life when you buy them and when you sell them.
Yeah.
But no, it's true. And my wife and I are the same way. We talked before about, we should buy a second house somewhere. And it's like, why? You're going to be locked into one house somewhere else. That's the only place you can go. You can now Airbnb a house anywhere you want to go.
That's right.
So instead of buying a second house, just rent houses.
Yeah.
There was a great article a while back. A guy retired and he figured it out that he lived in hotels, that it was actually cheaper than owning a house in retirement. And,
really?
Yeah, and he just traveled all over the country living in hotels. He had maid service, no HOA taxes, no homeowners insurance, none of that, right? So when you start peeling all that back, he just traveled the country living in hotels.
My dad, he was one actually that struggled with retirement. Like he had that, we call it the crossover risk.
Yeah.
And he, fell into depression. It was tough. And he kind of got out of it. They went on a trip and they didn't set any timeline they were coming back. They drove. They wanted to go to Mackinac Island in Michigan. But they figured out they could go to the Hampton Inn. I think that's what it was. It was like $100 a night.
Yep.
And they had continental breakfast because he's pretty cheap. and they had appetizers for happy hour. So he doesn't drink, but he was able to go in and that was his dinner. Yep. So he's like, this is great. All I got to pay for is lunch. And then we just go at our own pace. He's like, these places are never fully booked. So like we can always find one. If one were, then I'd just go on to the next town. And, there's probably something to that in a lot of ways, right? You can play the game a little bit.
Well, no, I think it's just you've got to start making the commitment to. I think the biggest hurdle is making the mental switch from being a saver to being a spender.
Well, it will be, right? And it's different for everybody because many people, they say, okay, I'm going to make up a number, $5 million. I want to live off Social Security, if I have a pension, that, and any of the growth or interest of this portfolio. And I don't ever want to touch principal. Well, what if rates are down? What if the market's down? And what if you're spending too much? You're going to end up inevitably getting into that principal. And I think that most people have that mindset that they can't do that. And you know what? That's great if you if you can not dip into it. But many people do. But what does that look like?
And it's okay.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is like, I don't want this to come off saying is like, oh, you should never touch your principal, because it's okay to touch your principal. You've earned it, you've saved it. And again, in this particular email, as a good example, he's got no kids, no legacy, right? So the money's just going to go to the government when he passes away.
Well, we need to talk before
charity, or wherever he wants it to go, right? But I'm just saying, it's like, if you don't have kids or legacy, this is a totally different thing too, because this is one of the battles that you have to hurdle, which is, again, I've got 4 kids, so I've got a reason to leave a legacy for my kids once my wife and I are gone. It's not going to be much of one, but they'll get a little something. You know what I'm saying? But this is the challenge. A lot of people say, "Oh, I want to leave everything to my kids. I don't want to touch the principal." And then they continue to be very frugal through their end of life by trying to leave this big legacy for their kids. And again, I think you have to find a personal balance to be happy and enjoy life and doing whatever it is you want to do, right? If you like to travel. If you want to fish, go fish. If you like to hunt. Whatever it is, play golf, go play golf. And then don't worry about the other stuff, as long as you're not, look, you can go overboard as well. If you're taking private jets to the golf course, you're probably going to run out of money. But I mean, if you can enjoy your life and still be somewhat financially conscious about those decisions and still leave a legacy for your kids.
It's funny. I was just thinking, like, this guy retired early, did really well. It's because he has no kids. I mean, think about it.
Do you realize if I did not have 4 kids, I would have retired like 15 years ago?
Oh, man. Yeah. Well, but that's a really good point. I think what many people need, and this is going to sound like a sales pitch here, but have an advocate. Have somebody that you can work with that will walk down that path with you and say, hey, here's my numbers. Here's what I think. And have somebody says, you don't need a yes man, right? And there's so many people out there that are just going to tell you whatever you want to hear. But I think you need to find somebody that's willing to say, hey, you can spend more money, or go take that extra trip, or what do you want to do? I had every so often we have to do that and say, you can really probably spend a little more, and here's how I would do it. Here's what you could do. And then, I had somebody the other day, and I'm like, they sent me a picture of their trip, and I was like, whoa, man, that looks pretty neat. Like, so you finally spend? Yeah. And I'm like, well, what did that end up running? And it was like $80,000. Like, whoa, hey. Now, this scenario, that was no big deal. And also it was a one-time situation, right? It wasn't something that was going to be habitual or every single year. But I think that you need to know yourself and know exactly what you're trying to accomplish. Have somebody that can run the numbers with you and kind of say, hey, you know what? You may be, a little too conservative on the distribution planning aspect, or just taking withdrawals in general. And here's how you would do so. So very tax efficiently as well, keeping in mind all of those other things we talk about often, right? Medicare premium surcharges, the IRMA, Social Security taxation, looking at the current tax code. I mean, we make it to 2029, this thing switches, right? You get the pendulum will swing the other direction, and at some point we may have higher taxes because we're still spending more money as a government. So things that need to be considered and factored in, and then obviously market dynamics. But if you're smart about this, you can live a very meaningful and fulfilling life. But I think that's the key. You got to figure out what that is.
Yeah. Right. The issue is, and again, back to this email, it's like, okay, how do I do this? Right. How do I go into retirement, and how do I start figuring this out? Well, if one, look, you spent your whole life budgeting to save this money to get to where you are. So you got to kind of budget for your retirement too. I want to spend, I've got this much money. I want to spend X amount every year, because again, we can just simple math, right? So, the market's going to make me 6. I'm going to spend 4. So I'm going to do a 4% withdrawal rate every year. And I'm going to live on that. And that's if you want to preserve your principal. If you don't care about preserving principal, you can spend more, right? So, but you've got to budget for it just like anything else. But you've also got to figure out what it is that you want to do. I think, and that's the biggest challenge, is like, okay, I'm here. What is it that I want to do? And this is where my wife and I are right now. We're trying to figure out now, is like, okay, what do we want to do? Right? Travel more, hang out more. What is it? What does that look like? And that's the biggest challenge. You've got to kind of figure that out first and say, okay, what I really enjoy doing is I like to travel. Okay. And I'm just throwing out things, right? Or I like to play golf, whatever it is. Okay. If go plan a trip somewhere just to get a number, right? So I'm going to fly to go to Pebble Beach and play a round of golf. Okay. Go price all that out. What's the airfare? What's the hotel cost? What's the round cost at Pebble Beach? The eating out, everything you're going to do while you're there, plan it all out. So like Danny said, so it's 20 grand or 30 grand, whatever it is.
Whoa. And
I have no idea because I don't play golf, but whatever it is, I can tell you going skiing with the kids is like $9 million.
I'm not sure how people do it.
But plan that out. So now you've got, okay, I know what this is going to cost. And then you can say, okay, look, I'm going to do this 3 times a year, 4 times a year. Start budgeting for it. And then go back and look at your finances and say, okay, great. I've got this much money in the bank generating 4% a year for me to spend on doing this stuff. Is it enough? Right? And then you can start doing this. But I think that the challenge is you've got to really figure it out. What is it that makes you happy? That's number one. And Adam and I talk a lot about fulfillment in life, which is it's great to save money. It's great to have money, but money doesn't create happiness, right? That's your social environment. That's your family environment. That's your friendships. That's your work. If you're still working, does it give you fulfillment? That's where happiness comes from. The money makes life a whole lot easier, right? Mm-hmm. It makes things a lot easier in retirement, but it's not going to give you fulfillment. So I think the big thing is first, you've got to figure out what fulfills you as a person. Is it, spending time in the community, charity work, outreach programs, being a mentor, whatever it is. Figure out what makes you fulfilled, and then building your retirement around that, and then budgeting for the spending that goes along with that. And then this becomes a whole lot easier. But I think, in this particular case with this gentleman and the same things that we run into with everybody else, the biggest hurdle is just them trying to figure out what it is they want to do.
Yeah.
Because I've known for 40 years I have to get up every morning and come to work. And then after work I go home, I do whatever I do at home, and then I repeat this process 5 days a week. That's easy. Right? Now, all of a sudden, you don't have that schedule, and there's nobody saying you have to be here and do this. You're like, what do I do with my time now?
Well, isn't it funny, though, that we have this milestone that we all want to hit, and then when we get there, so many people are, for lack of better words, unprepared.
Yeah.
Hey, I have the money. Everybody knows the quantitative aspect, but most fail to think about what is that qualitative. Quality of life. What do you wish to get from it? And so one thing I would recommend, if you're thinking about, okay, I'm going to retire, here are the things I'd like to do. You don't have to do it forever. So if you're looking at a plan, you need to think about, some of these are going to be time sensitive, where, hey, I'm checking off bucket list items. I do like to travel. I'd like to, just had a client who went to every continent, did it over a couple year time span. And that was one of their life's goals, right? Just wanted to really see the world and immerse themselves in other places. Well, fantastic. But that wasn't something they were going to do every year. So you start to look in the plan and say, okay, well, this is going to be for 3 years. Here's how much we're budgeting for this. You may be under on one, you may be over on a little bit, but this is kind of the ballpark. And then from there, hey, you know what? We've got our fix. We're not traveling as overseas anymore. Now we're just going to travel here domestically in the States. And that'll go on for the next 10 years, 15 years, whatever that is. Then typically what we see is that, okay, well, then we're going to travel to see family. And that's kind of, we begin to slow down over time. And then we start thinking about later in life. What are the healthcare expenses? What do those things look like? If you have kids or grandkids, are you going to help fund, college for them? Is that something that helps give you some purpose to help them? Are there other charities that you're inclined or that you like to donate? Maybe not money, but time, or both. And so we can think, and I'm just throwing a couple things out that are pretty common themes, but you can begin to think and start looking at it and say, okay, we're not going to do this forever, but let's put an expiration date. This is going to be for the next 5 years, 10 years, or every so many years, we want to take a big trip. It's not uncommon for us to have clients that'll say, hey, we're 70 years old. We think we've probably got about 10 to 15 years left of good travel. So for the next 10 years, every other year, we're going to do a big trip. The other years, we're just going to do something more, affordable, right?
Sure.
And we bake that into the plan. But there's so many ways to go about it. You just need to think about, and we can give you plenty of ideas. What works for you? What are you looking to accomplish? And then do you have the funds to achieve that goal? And for many, like in this case with going back to the email, we don't know, right? I mean, retired, I would assume in a very good position. However, that qualitative stuff can get out of control too.
Yeah. Well, and it is. And I think the bottom line, and just kind of wrap this up, is first of all, I think you need to kind of three things. One, it's okay to spend your money. I think this is one of the biggest hurdles that people have to get their mind around, is that, again, they've spent so much time saving to get here, right? It's almost a taboo for a lot of people to spend that money. It's like, oh, I've worked so hard for this money to get it here, I don't want to spend it. It's okay to spend your money. So get your mental mindset around that being okay. You don't need permission. Danny's not going to give you permission. Nobody else. Just give yourself permission that it's okay to spend your money. Secondly, again, you've got to find purpose, whatever that is in life that makes you somewhat happy, right? Something you look forward to doing every day. Find that purpose. There was a comment in chat saying, that when he got to that point, he realized that was a big crisis for him, is trying to figure out what that thing was, whatever it is. And then, finally, just plan for it. Again, it's okay to spend money. It's okay, you find your purpose, whatever it is, but then just plan for it. And just, if you need help, get a good financial planner like Danny or Richard or one of the guys here to help you walk through a financial plan. But you can do it on your own too. I mean, it's not hard to run a budget and just plan for these things. But just, do the same way you were budgeting and planning to get to retirement. Just budget and plan for how to spend it in retirement, and figure out what it is that's most important to you, and start enjoying your life. Again, it's, at the end of the day, there's one thing my dad always said, is that, when it's all over, you can't take it with you. Right.
Amen.
So, and again, it's great. I'm going to leave it all to my kids. That's awesome. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But is that the way you want to spend the last part of your life? You should enjoy. You've worked hard to get here, and it's important to enjoy the fruits of that labor. And there's no sin in that. Nobody's going to look down on you for that. Enjoy it. And be okay with it. And I think that's the big thing you've got to walk away with.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really about planning. You have planned to get to that point. Now, the beautiful thing is you can reinvent yourself. Like Richard will say, you have a blank canvas, right? Mm-hmm. Paint whatever story you want.
Right. Apparently mine is I can't retire, according to Danny. So
yours
my blank
is
canvas.
A desk. It's a desk and a computer screen. That's all it will ever be. Just get used to it, okay? Make peace. And it's fulfilling.
And
it's good. You have to wake up every morning. I want you words of affirmation. This is fulfilling. This is great. This is my purpose.
Being here every morning with all you guys in the chat is fulfilling. I do appreciate it very much. And saying that, be sure and like and subscribe to the channel. It certainly helps us bring good guests. We had a great interview yesterday that we're going to be running on November the 24th. You don't want to miss that one for sure. It's a really good conversation about the Fed money printer. So we had a great conversation about that. But your likes and comments and your subscriptions to the website, those type of things, it helps us get these guests in. So we can bring you more high quality guests. So please like and subscribe to the channel. It certainly helps us a lot. And in turn, we can help you as much as we can. So,
and if we're talking about you, don't hesitate to go to realinvestmentadvice.com. Go to ask a question.
Yeah.
We don't have to talk about it on air either.
Exactly. You say, don't talk about this in the air, but feel free to ask a question. Go to the website, realinvestmentadvice.com. Have a great day. We'll be back here tomorrow with Michael Lewitz. See you then.